You ready? All right. I'm set. Okay. Good morning. Welcome, one and all, to the Association of Retired Career Ambassadors of Nigeria ACAN Lecture Series. I'm your host, Bugaje. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure on behalf of the President and members of ACAN to welcome you all, wherever you are joining us from, to the fourth in our lecture series, designed to mark the 40th anniversary of Nigerians' independence. 60th, of Nigeria's independence. The last lecture in the series will be on the 6th of October, 2020, and it will be on foreign policy. These lectures have been so designed not only to examine our journey in the last 60 years, taking into consideration our accomplishments and failures, and how moving forward we can turn our failures into success and our challenges into opportunities for all Nigerians. In addition, in spending the first 4 lectures on domestic policies, it was to enable us at the end appreciate the impact of domestic policy, positively or negatively, on foreign policy. Our distinguished guest lecturer for today will speak broadly on the topic, management of diversity, management of resources, and building national consensus. These are issues which were not adequately covered in the previous lectures. Collectively, in my view, all these lectures should give us a clear roadmap on how to organize and direct the Nigerian project in the next coming years, if we are serious and sincere about the Nigerian project. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I invite Ambassador Daniel Hart, our chairman for today, former permanent secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, former Nigerian ambassador to Brazil, to deliver a speech from the throne. Ambassador Daniel Hart. Ambassador Daniel Hart, please, could you unmute your system?
I have done that.
You are on.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good morning, my dear colleagues, Mr. President of our respected doyen, if he's with us today, Mr. Moderator, our guest lecturer, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I feel honored to have been requested to be the chair of this segment of the ACAN lecture series. Given the impressive antecedents of our speaker as an intellectual, and in particular his wide knowledge of the political culture and dynamics of our country, I have no doubt there will be much to take home from Dr. Bugaje's lecture as he speaks on the subject of democracy and national consensus. I must quickly admit that before the commencement of the ACAN lecture series, I had pondered about how easy or difficult it would be for our guest lecturers to speak frankly to the sensitive subject matters they have been assigned. This is more for the reason that this whole endeavor amounts basically to an exercise in retrospect with prescriptions on the way forward, both of which might not be palatable or acceptable to some individuals in our audiences, or some segments of our society, given the nature of the inherent diversity of our country and polity. Not a few in this audience might be inclined to dismiss my concerns as unnecessary. Since I am not the lecturer, I cannot therefore be culpable. This is fair enough, but the truth of the matter is that this series of lectures throw up opportunities for us to speak very frankly among ourselves about our omissions and commissions of the past, including now, as a nation, in order to enable us design acceptable modalities to achieve those goals that would enhance our common good and earn respect for our nation internationally. We should almost feel we are close to something akin to a peaceful truth and reconciliation exercise here, as part of genuine commitment in our efforts to make our country great again. In that spirit, we would be obliged to take due cognizance of the sensitivities of other parties and compatriots. Fyodor Dostoevsky, the Russian philosopher, says, I quote, "Much unhappiness has come into the world because of bewilderment and things left unsaid." And rather aptly, Carl Jung, famous Swiss psychologist, says, I quote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Nigerians must learn to put the nation first and not the other way around. They must eschew unenlightened self-interest, and this includes the political class as well as the governed. There's need for an attitude change. The average Nigerian must demonstrate the necessary qualities to achieve goals that will serve the nation's best interest in any task assigned. This justifies the need for a total rebranding and the creation of a mechanism for reviving societal value systems, which will require all Nigerians to be honest and sincere enough to provide good leadership in whatever positions of responsibilities they find themselves. On its part, government must remain conscious of the centrality of the welfare of the citizen. Put bluntly, it is the duty of government to make its people happy at all times. All our clamors for consolidating our democracy, rule of law, human rights, good governance, infrastructure and security, etc., will come to naught if the citizens do not play their part well. Nothing illustrates the risks we run than the current pandemic the nation is grappling with. We lacked basic health infrastructures to deal with its immediate impact when it broke. And we are not in the line among those countries testing their own vaccines as possible cure, even with our country's immense endowment in many respects. It is therefore justified to take a look at our democracy 60 years after independence to ascertain if it has indeed served our nation's best interests as a governance model. In retrospect, it is clear that the level of achievement by successive governments since then do not match the vastness of our human and resource endowments. It may be argued that 31 years of the 60 years were under the military, and that this could have been responsible for the slowness in our growth and national development. Others argue that our faulty management of the democratic system is to blame, and they point at the examples of the USA, UK, Australia, Singapore, Malaysia, which are thriving models of democracy. Either way, the fact remains that our democracy has not worked optimally for us as it has done in these countries. In the aforementioned countries, orderliness and cohesion are fundamental to their remarkable achievements in their process of modernization and development. Could these attributes be what are missing in our own democracy? Today, there is lack of cohesion in our nation's body politic. 60 years after independence and trial of several systems, there is still a lack of sustainable political order. Otherwise, how could we have a functioning democracy and yet be confronted by a strident clamor for a new constitutional arrangement, aka restructuring? To strike the factor of good management further, there are those who say that the dividends of democracy may yet remain elusive in the absence of cohesion and political order, even in a restructured federal system. Let us strengthen our democratic culture and governance style. We have the strength in us. We need to believe in ourselves again. And as George Eliot, the English novelist, once wrote, what do we live for if it is not to make life less difficult for each other? Mr. President of ACAN, our respected doyen of ACAN, Mr. Moderator, our guest lecturer, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I do not intend to continue beyond here, else I'll be usurping the role of our respected guest lecturer, Dr. Usman Bugaje. I thank you for your attention.
I thank you, Your Excellency. And I invite Ambassador Omar, our former ambassador to Saudi Arabia, to introduce the guest lecturer for today. Ambassador Omar, please. Please, Ambassador, unmute your system.
Okay. Is it okay now? Can I be heard?
Unmute your system.
Am I being heard now?
Yes.
Hello?
Go on.
Hello?
Go on.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Please, go on, go on.
Hello? Oh, no. Hello? Hello?
Go on.
Yes, we can hear you. Go on.
At ABU Zaria? a later obtained his MA and PhD in history from the Institute. I'm having challenges.
Okay. Hmm? Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador seems to be having lectures, problems from, we'll still offer him the opportunity to tell us about the speaker, but not to waste everybody's time. I have the honor to invite Dr. Usman Bugaje to please deliver his lecture. We'll take on Oman later. I'll call him now and let him know. Sir, we are glad to see you. Thank you for joining us this morning. Please unmute your system.
I have just done so, Ambassador. Let me say first how delighted I am to have the opportunity to share some of my thoughts on this very important issue. I regret having missed some of the earlier lectures because I've been earlier committed to some programs, but I do hope I would not have to repeat what my earlier colleagues have already said. I deliberately thought of taking a few, moving away from repetition. And this is why when I looked at the topic, a lot has been said on democracy, on development, and I thought there are issues that may not have been discussed or tackled, which are very important for us to get out of where we are at the moment. And I therefore chose to speak.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Oh. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I chose to speak on issues of management of diversity and the issue of management of resources and the issue of national consensus. But let me say how glad I am to see Ambassador Hart. I have not seen you for some time now, and I'm glad that you are very much around. And from what you have said, you are very much yourself. I wish you can play much more prominent role than staying at the background. Many of you I know have got quite a lot to offer. Unfortunately, the system doesn't quite make room for people with competence, but we'll come back to that. So in doing this, I intend to first give a kind of background and context so that we are doing all this in the context of reflecting our 60 years of independence. And therefore, we are trying to be constructive. We don't have any gallery to play for or to play at. And therefore, it's a genuine search. And I'm encouraged by Ambassador Hart's remark that we need to be frank, we need to be open, we need to say things the way they are, because otherwise, if we sweep uncomfortable truth under the carpet, then we'll continue on the path we are, and we will fail to solve the problems. And that's going to be quite disastrous, not only for us, but for the rest of Africa. So I think it's important to say that this is a genuine exercise, well-intentioned. If we say things that some others don't find comfortable, they should understand that we have a responsibility to tell the truth as much as we can, even if it doesn't sound palatable. Let me make this also very obvious point, because maybe a few young people might be listening. And it's important to know that nation building is a human endeavor, right from Greek antiquity until date, and that human societies have always been evolving. They have always been, no society has ever been static. Right from Greek, Roman, and the different phases of European development, the Americas, Asia, China. I mean, human societies have always been evolving, and they have always been resolving one challenge after the other. There has never been a point in human history when there was no challenge to tackle. And it is by surmounting this challenge that we get the progress that we've been able to achieve as human civilization. Maybe closer home, when you look at the famous empires in Africa, like Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, these are empires or polities that were quite complex and that developed over time. And we have a lot to learn from these histories. I mean, Ghana lived its life, and then Mali took over, and then Songhai came and took over and excelled and became even bigger and stronger than the previous empires. And Songhai continued until 1591 when it was invaded by Morocco. And from that point in time, the whole of that area of Central Africa, or if you like, the central, what they used to call Blood of Sudan, went into crisis and turmoil until the end of the 18th century and beginning of the 19th, when there were a series of revolutions, not only in what is today largely Nigeria, but also in Mali itself, in the Segu area, and also as far back as the Senegambia. So there were a lot to learn from what has happened in our history, and it's important that we do not ignore this. We are also discussing this in a context where our peers, that is like Brazil, like Malaysia, like India, and even South Korea, that basically in the last 60 years when we gained our independence, we were basically at par. They were our peers. They were the ones that we were like struggling to grow, together. Most of them have actually grown. Brazil is among the 20 biggest economy in the world. It has strong military hardware and strong agricultural base. In 2015, some of you remember, they invested $120 billion in military hardware. And they have already developed a very, nuclear-powered fast attack submarine. Now, I'm saying this because some of you will remember in late 60s or early 70s, we established defense industries together with Brazil. In the same defense industry today, that is investing up to 120 billion in hardware, while our own, until very recently, they were producing furniture here in Kaduna. So it's sad to see this kind of disparity. Malaysia is at the cutting edge of technology at the moment, but Malaysia also took palm oil from us in the 60s and became the largest producer of palm oil in the world. In fact, they have turned palm oil into over 100 different products, shampoos, soaps, and so many other consumable products. But more important, they are into artificial intelligence, holograms, and they have produced their hybrid car, which I had the privilege of seeing in an exhibition last December. So they are doing so very well, while we are very, very far behind. India is another country. In 2014 or thereabout, India was earning from IT far more than we were making from oil. And that was when our oil revenue was quite high. So in other words, our peers have left us behind. And we need to find out why have we been left behind. And I think these three areas of management of our diversity, management of our resources, and the absence of elite consensus are a major problem. And this is why I want to address them. But just before I do that, I just want to capture a small paragraph of an earlier paper that for me summarizes some of our problems. We are defined by this conspiracy between rent-seeking elite in business and in government, who have held the state captive and its population victims of this political economy, in which state institutions are structured and designed to serve the ruling elite at the permanent expense of its citizens. To sustain this unholy arrangement, a unique mercantile political culture has been crafted, which prioritizes loyalty over competence, thuggery and impunity over rule of law, and prioritizes what you might call cap diem, the here and now principle that emphasizes what one gets here and now and has disdain for the future. And I'm sure you will agree with me, this is a very dangerous trajectory, which is not sustainable. And our diversity and resources, which are very rich, became a problem rather than a source of our strength. And our elite are ever divided. And what we hear in the conversation today is not a president that can actually fix the economy. People are still looking for a northern president or a southern president or an Igbo president or a Yoruba president or God knows what president. I mean, these kind of things do not, nowhere in the world today. I'm sure even in North Korea, you know, they don't discuss, they discuss nuclear energy, they discuss how to, you know, actually excel in technology. I mean, we are still stuck with these, you know, very primitive, you know, ideas. We don't even discuss the future. So our political conversation is all about this, what I actually call stupidity. And maybe as a footnote, if there is anything that this current regime has contributed to our thinking, it is the fact that it is futile to start thinking of a presidency from your part of the country. If any lesson has been learned from this regime, it is the fact that if the North thought that by having a Northern president, they would be better off, now they realize they are actually worse off than any part of the country. And therefore, I hope we can drop from this regime this idea of having a president from one part of the country or the other. What we need is a competent, educated, you know, Nigerian president who can even engage the world of the 21st century, who can speak to the young people, appreciate their aspirations, and inspire them to compete with the young people in other parts of the world and create the environment for them to do so, and provide them the educational institutions to be able to do so, provide them with the health institutions to be able to develop the, you know, human capital that is required for any country to excel in the 21st century. Because in the 21st century, it's not oil, it's not any other thing. Knowledge itself is the greatest capital. And if you need to do that, I mean, if you realize that, then you have to do something about our poor education. I'm saying this because unfortunately, our leadership are still stuck. You know, nearly half of the people who are occupying political posts at the moment either have no certificates, or their certificates are missing, or they have false certificates, or some kind of, you know, problem with their own education. How can this country grow in the 21st century if we are led by people whose education is so poor? Nigeria is blessed with very educated people. They are running institutions around the world. You know, I mean, a lot of you have worked in many places, luckily. So I'm speaking to those who, in fact, should be able to tell us, you know, go around the world, you find Nigerians excelling. But yet we are stuck here with people whose educational qualifications are even in doubt. Either they have falsified the certificates, or they are missing, or I mean, some kind of, you know, it's really very sad, and it's something that I think we need to. So having given this very quick overview, let me take the issues one by one. And I don't mean to exhaust them. Time will not allow for that, but I intend to raise some of the issues around diversity so that we can understand what the issues are and how can we improve on what has been done so far. Now, like I said, it's important that we understand, and this has to be, if you like, emphasized over and over, that nature in itself is diverse and plural. So anybody who is trying to go into his own tribe or his own people or break away as if Nigeria is a kind of bus that if you don't like the passengers, you just simply ask the driver to stop and you drop so that you can take another bus. I mean, this idea of secession, this idea of breaking away, this idea of, you know, they are so primitive, they are so stupid. They are ideas that cannot sell in the 21st century. They have never, and they will never. And therefore, we have got to find a way of communicating to the idiots who are talking about separation, who are talking about this, who are talking about that, that look, we don't have time for this stupidity. Let us see how can we actually make this country better. And then everybody will be able to. So we have to tell them that nature is plural. And we can see it even in agriculture. Diversity is the strength in agriculture. Monocultures are weak and they don't sustain. And therefore we must make it very clear that our homogeneity, you know, is not really an asset. And if you are in doubt, look at Somalia. This is a country made up of, you know, the same ethnic group, if you like, the same religion, the same culture. And for the last 40 years, they've been in turmoil. Now they're all over the world. So being ethnically homogeneous has never been an asset. And so the attempt to go back to some kind of, I don't know, village with only the people that you know who speak your language, who understand your culture, and all, that itself is stupid. And I wish we can take all these leaders who speak in this language back to school so we can teach them what the realities are in the world. Otherwise, they can mislead a number of other ignorant people, and we are going to continue to suffer from this kind of stupidity. I mean, just so that we again emphasize on the point, if you go back into history, cities and polities that have become strong, and I'm here talking of, you know, even cities in Africa like Jenny, like Timbuktu, like Agadez, like Kano in the past, they were strong because they were cosmopolitan. They were huge commercial centers. And this is what you get. Even America became strong because of the immigration, because it was a land of immigrants, people who were rejected or who suffered from one setback or another, but who were bright and who, look at how they built the country. So the point is, and I like to emphasize at the risk of sounding monotonous, that diversity is a source of strength. And the kind of cultural homogeneity that people are looking for, you know, is a source of weakness. It creates more problems than it can solve. Recently, a study was made in the UK, as you know, every city, you know, you know, I mean, the fastest growing economy, city by city, and Leicester in the Midlands was found to be one of the fastest growing economy. And they dig deep and they found out that actually it was because of the influx of Turkish and later on Somalis that went there. The Turkish opened a lot of restaurants, Somalis started small scale businesses and enterprises, and that was what made Leicester to become the fastest growing economy, city in the UK. So anytime you have diversity, you know, so long as you do not create conflict, and so long as we have conflict resolution mechanisms, that society that is diverse is likely to do a lot better. So let me come back to the issue. In our own evolution as a nation, we have seen how attempts were made and mistakes were made, but we can learn from these mistakes. If we take, for example, the 1951 Macpherson Constitution, we see basically how it tried to promote cosmopolitanism, and how the 1954 Constitution created some kind of setback, and how the 1979 Constitution tries to protect minorities by taking steps to ensure things like federal character. And now that spirit is a very good spirit, but we may not have done it properly well. And that's where we need to improve on our own management of diversity. We learn from the lessons of others, countries like Malaysia, Singapore, countries like a number of countries, even Brazil itself, is diverse, like Ambassador Hart will, I'm sure, confirm. In fact, certain diversities are more difficult to deal with than the ones, we're having here. And the experiences of Sudan is also very important for us. Southern Sudan clamored, for separation. Eventually they got it. But what did it bring to them? They're in conflict between themselves. The very tribes that separated from the Northern Sudan, it's now Northern Sudan that is helping to minimize, mitigate, and stabilize that particular part of the country. So, I mean, these are things that we should do, but we need to look at our constitution and see how can we create the kind of political engineering that is required to guarantee all the groups a level of equity that can give them the rest of mind to have that sense of belonging and to be able to contribute to the development of the whole country. Some of the issues that I think we need to look at in our management of diversity, I'll just mention 5 here, is that we need to distinguish between unity and uniformity. There are many people who think that because we want to be united, then we have to be entirely uniform in what we wear, in what we do, in how we, no, this is not possible. Like I said, culture is diverse, and diversity is beautiful, is strength. Therefore, what we need is to appreciate the diversity, but create unity out of that diversity. And there are several ways to do that. And maybe when we come to the discussions, we can discuss the details. We also need to decentralize. Nigeria is over centralized at the moment. And there are many who are discussing the issue of the legislative list, the exclusive, the concurrent, and the residual. And these are the kind of issues we need to revisit. And this is what federalism can do. I do hear the conversation, people talk about true federalism as if there is a false federalism. This kind of conversation itself suggests that we're not sufficiently educated to understand that federalism is just a flexible arrangement. So there is nothing like true or false about it. It's a question of evolving our federalism to fit in with the needs of our own times. And this is something you can do through dialogue, through conferences, through a number of other mechanisms that are available to us. But we need to decentralize. We need to improve on our federalism. We need to give different groups room to excel without having to separate, because separation brings weakness, but unity brings strength. Again, we need to also avoid inequalities, because these inequalities accentuate these differences and create resentment. This resentment definitely, elicits a lot of agitations, and it creates, a lot of problems. So, and it is possible to do that by basically addressing our development issues. We also need to have a conflict resolution mechanism with early warning signs. At the moment, really, I'm not aware. There are lots of institutions of government, some of them quasi-government institutions that have been created. But there is not much thinking that goes into that. and therefore they do not quite perform the role they are supposed to. In fact, we do not do any monitoring and evaluation. We do not, go through and say, okay, what are the objectives for putting together this institution? After 1 year, how far has it gone? Has it actually made any impact? If it hasn't, why has it not made any impact? And therefore, what can we do to make it, make more impact? We are not thorough in what we do. And this is the kind of thing we have to create a conflict resolution mechanism, so that before these conflicts grow out of hand and create the kind of things that they are creating now, we would have understood them, we would have resolved them, and there is no human problem that human beings cannot resolve. They have done that in history, and they will continue to do that. Human ingenuity has a huge capacity to deal with a lot of these issues. The problem is often when you do not bring those with the experience, with the knowledge to run the institutions. So when you prioritize loyalty and bring your kith and kin, irrespective of whether they're competent or not, of course, then you have these institutions being run down, literally, and then with all the problems in its trail. So the other point is that we need to set goals for ourselves. This country may have a development plan of some sort, which is crafted in the Ministry of Finance and Planning and these kind of things. But we know a lot of these things are cut and paste. They just take things from some countries, they just paste them without even engagement with the citizens. The government does not engage. And surprisingly, this is, a democracy. And democracy is about views of people. But this, especially this particular regime, it has not been engaging in ways that will allow to even understand, the society. I hope I can still be heard. The power went off on my side, but
yeah, we are hearing you. We are hearing you.
Very good, very good. So these are some of the issues that I think. Just one moment. Yeah, these are some of the issues that I think we need to we need to look at, and I wouldn't want to detain us on this very important issue, because there are other things we need to move on and look at. So let me move to the management of our resources, and let me recall a very sad thing that I discovered a few years back. I was in the National Assembly from 2003, 2007. And for those 4 years, I was in a number of committees, and one of them is the Finance Committee. And one of the things that that still pains me, for the 4 years I was in the National Assembly, we never got to know exactly the revenue we make from oil. For these 4 years, the figures that you get from the Revenue and Mobilization Fiscal Commission is different from the one you get from the Ministry of Finance, is different from the one you get from the NNPC, is different from the one you get from the Central Bank. Attempts that we made to bring all these institutions together to say, sit down in this room, work out and give us a particular figure that you all can agree with, did not work out. Now, of course, you do know what's happening. So if you cannot even know what resources you have for certain, you know that there is a huge problem in terms of management resources. But more seriously, it basically what defines our management, basically rent seeking, which determines even the policies that we put in place, the policies that have been put, and even the laws of the EFCC and the ICPC and all these institutions that are supposed to help us manage our resources by blocking pilferage and trying to, punish, those who may have diverted our resources. It's not functioning. And we all know the fraud that has become of both the EFCC and the ICPC. So resources, in terms of resource management, we have done very, very poorly. We are still doing very, very poorly. We have the institution that was, the financial institution, the NITI, the Nigerian, I think, extractive industry, that we borrowed from others who have managed their resources very well. It doesn't have the teeth. The issue they are post time, periodic. Unless you care to find out what these reports are, they are not part of our intention. But the best way to manage resources we have and what exactly that we are going to do with it. And this is the dimension I really want to emphasize, that the most important aspect of the management of resources is to have good ideas about how to put your resources into work, or how to make your resources work for you. Now, in this respect, we are very poor in terms of ideas. Basically, we don't seem to have. Now, let me explain this. If you recall, in the 50s, Korea had its own civil war. They lost about 2 million people. So in the 60s, South Korea was declared as the second poorest country in the world, meaning basically the one before the last. And yet, and this is a country some of you who have served there would know, which has only 20% of its landmass that is actually flat, available for agriculture, for habitation, is largely rocky. But look at what they have done. Basically, with no resources, and until the American investors, actually came to support it, they started from the scratches. And where are they today? They are at the cutting edge of technology. They produce Kia, Hyundai, Samsung, so many other gadgets that we all use, and is one of the top economies of the world. They didn't have resources as such, but they had ideas. Saudi Arabia, that had far more resources, or the Arab countries that had, are still a consumer economy. They've not been able to, because they have not applied ideas into their own economy. So if we had applied ideas, we would. Indonesia is also an oil producing country. And my last reading, Indonesia's per capita is like 4 or 5 times that of Nigeria. I mean, they suffered most of the things that we suffered, but they have overcome, because they've allowed ideas to drive their management of resources. So management of resources is not just to stop corruption and to share whatever you have. No. How do you make the best of what you have? How do you plan for the future? How do you diversify your economy? How do you move your country to become competitive so that you can actually compete, especially in the 21st century, in the knowledge economy, which is the most sustainable economy? And these are the kind of things that we lack. So there is a problem of equity in the distribution. There is a problem of the reward system. There are a lot of other problems. But I think the key issue with management of resources are ideas, especially in the 21st century. We lack these ideas in governance. And I'm not saying we lack these ideas. In fact, if you get to universities, our universities, even as poor as they are at the moment, you find a lot of good ideas. But these good ideas don't get into policy. There is, no nexus between the knowledge we produce in our institutions and the policies that we actually put in place. And the very political culture actually inhibits the evidence-based policy making, because they don't want to read, they don't read, they don't listen, they don't even understand when you speak, a lot of them. And you need to go to the National Assembly. If any one of you had engaged the National Assembly in the last week, you find that you sometimes cannot even communicate. And this is part of the problem. So to manage our resources very well, what we require most ideas. Of course, we have to come up with equity and ways of resolving a lot of these issues. Let me quickly move to national consensus. What I have in mind here is that we need to have an elite consensus as to where we want this country to be. At the moment, what I know, and I would be glad to know if there is something better, is that the elite in this country are pulling in different directions. Northern elite are pulling in the northern direction. Southwestern elite are pulling in the southwestern direction. Southeastern elite are pulling in the southeastern. South elite are pulling in the south-south direction. Everybody is failing to see that this idea of pulling in your own direction doesn't take you very far. Where are you going to go? At the end of the day, it's a silly thing. And elite have a responsibility, because it's the elite that have the ability to think, the ability to plan, the ability to know what is happening around the world. And therefore they have a responsibility. That knowledge that they have confers on them a responsibility to provide leadership and to make sure that there is a consensus, in the direction this country should be. We have got to make sure that we have a consensus first on the kind of leadership that we're going to have in this country. In other words, we have to agree that we need leadership that has competence, that has conscience, and that has courage. You see, if we do not have that consensus, then we'll allow the crooks and the criminals that are leading us now. And we are watching them destroying this country, because as elite, we have not come together to say, no, we are not going to allow anybody who is not competent to come. We have got to put certain criteria. At the moment, honestly, you can just come out of anywhere and become what you want in this country without even going to school, because these certificates can be faked. And we have had cases like that. And therefore, we have got as elite step in and say, no, there must be criteria for leadership. You can't just come and lead, even if it's a local government. Talk of a very complex polity of 200 million population. And you think anybody can do that? Just simply without any criteria, beyond the fact that you have money or you are connected? So this is something that we have got to have a consensus on. And I also think that we have got to have a consensus as to where we want to be in the next 30 years. I'm saying 30 years not because there is anything sacrosanct about it, but because in 30 years' time, which will be 2050, the projections are that this country is going to be in the region of 400 to 500 million in terms of population. This would make us the third largest country in the world. So what do we want to make of that population? How do we provide education for that population? How do we provide food for that population? How do we provide jobs for that population? How do we provide? This is the conversation. And the elite has, we have to come together and find out, where do we want to be in 30 years? Because we are going to carry this burden. More children are coming up. I mean, if there is anything we can do to stop it, fine, good. But if things continue the way they are, we are likely to end up with close to 500 million, with no food to eat, with no roads, no jobs. So where do we want this country to be in the next 30 years? This is something that we need. And then we need to also agree where exactly do we want, or what role do we want to play in Africa? What role do we want to play in the world? You can see Europe has played its role, and is now under the burden of huge aging population that are taking all the pensions. European economy is in trouble. European society without immigration is in trouble. You can see the troubles in America. And this creates an opportunity, but we have to agree what role we want to play, and then work back and say, okay, how do we get what will enable us to play this particular role? How do we retool our nation? How do we equip ourselves? And I'm not talking here about physical equipment. How do we equip ourselves with the ideas? How do we put the institutions in place so that we can generate the kind of manpower, the kind of intellectual resources that will allow us to live? Because the future is for knowledge. If you are not knowledgeable, you will just simply be dropped. And in a competitive environment of the 21st century, just perish and nobody will care. So the point is, we need to know what role do we want to play as a country in Africa, the largest Black population in one polity. What is it that we want? At the moment, it's not part of our conversation. So it's not the consensus of how to steal Nigeria's resources, that there is some kind of unholy alliances to do that, and that's why we are suffering. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a constructive consensus that looks at, the kind of leadership we're having, that looks at the kind of economy we're going to have in the future, what role we hope to play in the future, how do we equip ourselves to play that particular role. This is our responsibility, and we have to find a way of doing that. And the faster we do so, the safer for us, because some of the things that you know, perhaps more than I do, the indices, the parameters are not good. They're not encouraging. And we have got to find a way to resolve those issues. And finally, still on the elite consensus, but more on the issue of the two other points I've made on management of our diversity, the management of our resources, and of course, having a consensus as to which way this country is going to be or to go, or where do we want to be. I think the key issue is the leadership recruitment process. At the moment, the leadership recruitment process keeps churning out incompetent leaders who have no idea of what to do. You have got people who will contest for governorship. They will not even have, one page of what to do when they get there. They have no idea. So when they get there, that's when they start scratching their head and start looking for friends. And this is why they become victims of a lot of fraudulent consultants who come with, mesmerizing PowerPoint presentation with colors and histograms and pie charts and language that they don't clearly understand, but they become impressed. And they put in their resources and nothing comes out of it. And this is the kind of way we are wasting our resources and wasting our time and wasting our population. And we have got to stop that if we really want to address the issue of management of our diversity, the management of resources, because all these things require ideas. So we have got to address, and urgently too. At the moment, what qualifies you to contest for an election, and we all know that, is money or connection. You have to have either a godfather who himself, he must have a lot of money, or you have money yourself. It doesn't matter how you make them. And I mean, I've been in politics, I'm still in politics, and I can tell you with every confidence that if you walk into any political party, it doesn't matter whether it is APC or PDP or PRP or SDP, just walk in if you want to do this and tell the chairman of the party that you want to contest for a post of whatever. I can bet the first question he will ask you is not your character, it's not your competence, it's not your background. The first question he will ask you is that, do you have money? Now, that tells you that what defines our politics is money. The next thing when election comes, how can you raise thugs that can now do the rigging for you? And how do you raise money to bribe the police? How do you raise money to bribe all the security agencies? How do you raise money to bribe the INEC officials? This is how our elections are conducted. We may not want to talk about it, but this is it. And how can this kind of system bring out competent people? Most competent people will not even want to be in that kind of arena. Most competent people will not even go in that particular direction. And because we have allowed this thing to go on for some time, this is where we are. And just for emphasis, 20 years ago, Rwanda came out of the ruins and the ashes of the worst genocide in Africa. But 20 years after, where is Rwanda now? It is one of the fastest growing economy in Africa. It has one of the cleanest cities in Africa. It has one of the safest societies in Africa. Some of you have gone to Kigali or you have gone to the hinterland. They have got their agricultural production in some products have become 5 times what they were before the genocide. Their coffee growers are supplying Starbucks in the United States. They have so changed. 20 years ago, we resumed our civilian democratic rule. Where has it taken us to? We have gone down the drain. Our economy is shrinking. Despite the huge, our poverty, is multiplying. So we need to ask ourselves, what is wrong? And clearly what is wrong is leadership. We are getting the wrong leaders. And the current calibration of the leadership recruitment process in our political parties, except by some accident, will never bring a competent leader. You'll continue to get this same circle of incompetent, ignorant, a lot of them crooks and criminals. We know that. I have not been a diplomat, so I can say my things the way I want them. Diplomats will certainly be more, they will have more finesse in what they say, but I think I think it's time to say things as they are, because if we do not correct ourselves in the next election, I'm afraid this country may go down the drain, because the parameters, the indices, the statistics, even those produced by the National Bureau of Statistics, are frightening. And therefore, the elite must come together and see how can we change and recalibrate the leadership recruitment mechanism in our political parties. Some people would say, no, this is impossible. No, nothing is impossible. Especially, something that is human. How many countries have gone through what we went through? And they have now exited, and it's doable. And if we want, we can discuss more about this. So let me just summarize by saying, and why I was deliberately brief, perhaps I can now explain, is that I'm talking to some of the most informed citizens of this country. Ambassadors have gone around the world. They have seen a lot, and they have read a lot. And therefore, they are likely to know far more than I do in a lot of these matters. They have seen what other countries have made of their wealth. They have made of their diversities. They have made of, they've made out of elite consensus. And therefore you have a lot of knowledge. I wish this country can tap the enormous amount of resources that you have. And I'm not talking about money here, I'm talking about ideas. I wish there is a forum where some of you will keep talking to people in government. Just narrate the experiences that you have. It was in this country from this time to this time. They had a crisis. This is how they resolved it. This is going to be knowledge, incredible amount of knowledge that we require. But look at you now, you have retired, you have been put on the side, nobody talks to you, nobody, I mean, you just sit on your television, I mean, in the comfort of your house, watching television and having the agony of seeing what you are seeing. So I just want to say that we can manage our diversity better. And we have got so many papers written. And when I eventually put this paper together, you will see the amount of resources, intellectual resources that have been gathered, analysis that have been done. So we have a way to manage our resources, but we have to, I mean, diversity, but we have to take the points that I've made, you know, not to confuse unity and uniformity, and to appreciate the fact that we have got to set goals, we have got to have a better a mechanism to protect, you know, minorities, or to protect the different groups, and of course, improve on our federalism. If we improve on our federalism, cut down this long exclusive list, and return most of these responsibilities, you know, to the center, these things is going to. Management of our resources has been terrible, terrible. I mean, just yesterday I was reading 2 point whatever billion of naira meant for feeding during this COVID was found, you know, diverted into private accounts. I mean, this is basically what we do. And how many people have done that, gotten away with it? I mean, what we have in the EFCC and the ICPC is all joke. It's not coming to anything. So we're not managing our resources, but we can. And then again, this thing goes on precisely because the elite are just simply watching. And everybody is pulling its own direction. And we cannot see the danger we are facing, because the people we are excluding in our economy, and their number is increasing, is multiplying. One day, when they cannot find something to eat, as you know, they are going to come to us, and nobody is safe. And they won't care whether you have participated or you have not participated. If you have a house, if you have a car, if you have got, you know, you are a target. So can't we even see the danger is palpable, and we need to do something about it. So I hope from this conversation, something can happen, that elite can come together and say, look, we have got to change this leadership recruitment mechanism. We don't have to be in the political party to do that, but some of us who are in politics know, have a very good idea of how this thing can be done. But since this is not the topic of our discussion, we can take it up another day. I have been, like I said, just to the point, because I'm talking to a very informed audience, and I do hope that in the interaction that will follow, the questions and answers will be, I mean, the comments that I'm also going to learn from will all help us to know exactly what do we do. And the final thing is that I hope these lectures, these conversations will not end up like the normal webinar conversations. They are done, they are recorded, a report is written, and nothing is done about it. Because this, again, is why this country is going down the drain. We know what to do, but we don't want to dirty our hands. We know what to do, but we expect someone else to come and do it. We know what to do, but we think it is not our business. It's the business of God knows who. Now, if we continue thinking in this direction, we should not blame anybody if this country goes down the drain, God forbid. I thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Usman Bugaje, for your very well brilliant lecture. Thank you for all what you have said. I'm not sure that this is speaking truth to power. I think it's more or less speaking truth to the people, particularly to the elites of this country, many of whom have chosen to stay away from politics, and others have just decided that if you can't beat them, you join them. I don't think anybody can put it as clearly and constructively as you have done. And I'm not sure anybody would quarrel with the issues you've expressed about how to manage our resources, manage our diversity, and at the same time, build a national consensus. The issue of elite consensus is something that is taught in almost all departments of political science, even in Nigeria. And it means that so many years after in this country, it's been difficult for the elites to build a consensus about this country and the future of this country. A colleague of mine will thank you later, but for now, as always, we want to open with Dr. Usman has established a fantastic background that enables us to broaden our conversation this morning. So I invite Ambassador Chudi Okafor, who has indicated that he wants to speak. And Dr. Usman, I will appeal to you. If you look on your screen, I think there are one or two questions there also that you can take while you are responding to Dr. Okafor's questions or comments or question, and we'll come back and identify other speakers as we see them. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, sir. Moderator, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Bugaje, thank you so much for x-raying some of the inconvenient truths about our polity. The question I really have is, so what do we do now about our recruitment process? Because every state in Nigeria has its own first 11. But see what is going on. The shenanigans being played out since 1999, our democratic dispensation started. Nigeria clearly has been over-politicized, but under-governed. And luckily, you were a prominent member of the National Assembly until recently. And you have also operated at very key levels, different levels in our society, in our nation building efforts. You have traveled widely. One is wondering, how come that you made copious references to Southeast Asian nations with much diversity also? Malaysia, for instance, where they took the oil palm seedlings from Nigeria in 1963. And also by that 10 years after, 73, we shared the proceeds of the research they undertook, 50-50. And as the DG there said sometime, if we go to NIFO, Benin, what Nigeria got is still lying there. You can also say much about Thailand and Indonesia, of course, what they have been able to do. They have the same resources with us, but the difference today is like day and night. So what is really going on? Just yesterday, we had about the only resource which we boasted for many years. We are talking of, is this oil cost or a blessing to us? Petroleum industry bill, with longest in the National Assembly until recently. We really don't know what is going on with our dear country. So my question is, what do we do? The second question again is what you referred to about engagement with the people. Which people are we talking about? Because we have abandoned our rural communities. A majority of us are from the rural communities. Since 1999, majority of our people in our rural communities, they have been abandoned, whether at the federal, state level, local governments are not functioning, which is clear to everybody. What do we do about our people? Because in drawing up these development plans, it's the same elite engagement in Abuja, in Lagos, and state capitals. Most of our people in the rural communities know next to nothing about the plans we are talking about because they are not translated into languages they will understand. There are no town hall meetings, and so on. So I think there is a very serious problem in our country, because show me any developed country, then I will show how people at the level of rural communities also fare. That is the truth. And when all the major development agencies are telling us we're at the very bottom of the ranking, many Nigerians wonder why. The reality is because they are looking at our rural communities. So please, I will want you to speak more about this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ambassador. Can I give the floor to Ambassador Nke Wadibia Ayao? Ambassador Wadibia Ayao, please unmute your system.
Yes, I've unmuted it now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I want to thank Dr. Usman Bugaje. I met him first in 2003 in the National Assembly, and he, true to type, he has not failed to tell us as it is. I want to thank you, sir, for your very incisive lecture. You have so cleverly spoken of management of our diversity, of our resources, and of national consensus. You did not mince words. You spoke as usual in your very blunt manner, showing us that ethnic homogeneity has never been an asset, and that in most cases, that diversity has actually been an advantage. But sir, I want to ask you, you have put the onus, the responsibility squarely on the elite. But my question is, the elite know all these things. How do we get the elite to form a consensus? That is what troubles my mind, because you have outlined how the elite, certain elite have come together to manage this kleptocracy conspiracy, how they have come together to wash their hands as if these things do not, as if these things happening to them are happening in a vacuum. How can we get the elite, sir, to come to a consensus? That's my most important question for now. Thank you very much. Once again, I thank you. This is Ambassador Nkem Wadibia speaking.
I remember you.
Permanent secretary.
I remember you very well, Ambassador.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Wadibia. Ambassador Akinsoya, your Ambassador Akinsoya.
Well, thank you, Mr. Moderator. I want to thank Dr. Usman Bugaje, who I had the opportunity of hosting in Ethiopia some few years back when he was in the National Assembly. I wasn't surprised, very pungent, very focused. I still recall your intellectual engagement with your colleagues in Addis Ababa University, and also with the speaker in the assembly. Thank you for your very brilliant lecture. But I'm surprised you didn't make reference to Ethiopia that I know that you are very passionate about. in terms of managing diversities and also the developmental efforts. Ethiopia is the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, and we are Federal Republic of Nigeria. I know that the Ethiopians have always erroneously said that what differentiates Nigeria from Ethiopia is the democratic. But looking at the main issues that you identified, managing diversities and managing resources, Ethiopia, for my mind, comes in terms of good examples of those very important issues. They were never colonized. They had this heterogeneity, the Oromos, the Tigris, and for many years, the Tigris were lording it over them, until you have somebody like Menes Selnawi that came in and espoused the theory of a developmental state. So we found that if you go to Ethiopia, the infrastructural development, even with their little resources, they have one of the most successful terrorist trains. They have one of the most successful intercity Djibouti-Addis trains that was built by the same Chinese that are struggling with our own development of the railway system in Nigeria. They have also, in terms of their developmental status, have one of the best indices in terms of attaining the MDGs and later, now the SDGs. Is it education? Is it health? And many other things. So this, to my mind, is a good example of how you can manage diversities and manage resources with limited manage your limited resources, within the context of developmental states. So what is your take? As you talk a lot about recruitment process in Nigeria, the elite's failures and all that, what is your take? Taking the example of some of these states that do not have the resources that we have, but at the same time, making their mark in the international system, and also in terms of taking care of their people. Within the short time of Abiy Mohamed's coming in, he became one of the first African leaders to be peace, to have the Peace Award. So I think this is, for me, a sort of focus. A focus that has sort of eluded us. But of course, with the resources that we have, with the elites that we have, it is doable. But I don't know how this can be done without political parties, Dr. Usman Bugaje. This is the only thing that, the only question mark I have about your lecture. But again, it was nice seeing you again, sir, and thank you for your lecture.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Akinsoya.
Thank you, Ambassador Akinsoya. I invite Ambassador Eni Onobu. Eni Onobu, you have the floor, or please unmute your system. And it's nice to see you, Eni.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. And then also, I want to appreciate the chairman of the occasion, Ambassador Hart, for a wonderful statement by the chairman. And then, of course, I pay my respect to our doyen, and then also the president of ARCAN. Dr. Usman Bugaje has given a wonderful, excellent address today regarding the issues that we face as a country, that we've been tackling for the last 60 years of independence. Since he had also mentioned a number of countries that I am familiar with, particularly Korea, I think I also will bring up a few examples of my time in Korea. But today, really, he spoke to about three elements in his speech. Diversity, management, managing our resources, And of course, the issue of the elite. I think actually you can reduce his whole address to that last bit. The problem of Nigeria is the problem of the elite, because it is the elite that defines the values of society. If you get the elite right, you can deal with the other two issues that he raised. You can manage your resources, and you also can deal with the issue of diversity. And I think the problem that we have is that we have an elite that doesn't really understand what it means to build a country. So let's go back to Korea, which he had mentioned. I was in Korea for 6 years, almost 7 years as ambassador. And I think I'm fairly familiar with the situation of Korea. And I think they've got the issue of the elite right in that country. They have defined the purposes of the Korean state. Every Korean, however old you are, young or old, you are Korean first and you are Korean last. If you are not Nigerian first and you're Nigerian last, it becomes very difficult to deal with the issues of what the Nigerian state ought to come to grips with, really. When I was living, for instance, when I was living in Korea in 1997, and Korea has a long history of dealing with security issues. When it did an audit of the 12 most senior Korean generals and admirals, and Korea is basically a beauty state. Out of the 12, 11 were Christian. And Christianity is a small minority in Korea. And only one of the 12 was a Buddhist. And it was never an issue at all. Can you imagine that happening in Nigeria? All hell will break loose. All hell will break loose if that happened in Nigeria. But for the Koreans, it wasn't an issue because they were looking for a few good men. And when they cast the net at the time, what the net cost was that 11 Christian generals and one. And maybe in a different time, of course, the ratio will be different, but for them, it wasn't an issue at all. That is something that we should look at. In Korea also, there's no impunity. Whatever you are, you are under the law. You can be the president or you can be a cab driver on the street. The law determines your status in society. That isn't the case in Nigeria. And that must come from the values that the elite of this country will shape for us. In Korea also, unlike Nigeria, they believe that publicly owned enterprises will work and make profit. Take, for instance, the Korean electric power company, completely owned by the Korean nation. But when I was living, KEPCO produced 65,000 megawatts of power. 65, not 5,000, not 10,000, not 15,000, 65,000 megawatts of power. Just one company, completely owned by the state, and it was making profit. In Korea, there's an enterprise called Pohan. Pohan is electric. Pohan is and it produced about 65 million tons of power. And Pohan was established at the same time that we established our Ajaokuta. Ajaokuta, I'm not sure we've ever produced anything in Ajaokuta, and probably we will never produce, but it was, government owned. The point that I'm making here basically is that until we come to that point where we believe as the elite that it is the values that we define, it's the values that we espouse, that will shape our land, and thereby further the cause of the Black person, we will be in trouble. And it appears that we're not just ready for that yet, really. And I think that is the issue that we need to begin to address our minds to. How do we create that elite that will create that perimeter that will guide our land? We haven't done that yet. And I think we need to address that. That's a major issue. And finally, I think I should also ask you this question, Usman Bugaje, since I think I also know you too. I think every Nigerian knows you actually. I knew you as a
really.
Yes, I know you that as a strong political activist, as a great politician, and as a great intellectual. But when I saw the introduction in the footnote, I saw Usman Bugaje, the Islamic, intellectual, and I was wondering, what is that? Where is that one coming from? I saw that in the introduction there, and I said, why does he want to be introduced as the Islamic scholar? Of course, you are a scholar, I know you are, but what is that little bit about Islamic scholar really? I didn't think that applied to you, frankly. A scholar is a scholar, and a Nigerian patriot is a Nigerian patriot, and the elite that we set to create to be that elite that is, as to use your own word, will be cosmopolitan in terms of all embracing, in terms of the diversity of worldview that it presents to the world. And I think you're one such person. That's why I thought I should just bring this up a little bit. But yours has been a wonderful, wonderful lecture today, and I cannot but applaud you. You've done a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Nobu. Actually, maybe Dr. Usman should correct that, the last thing you said, because if you Google the internet, you will see that he's described as an Islamic scholar. So it's not the fault of the gentleman who wanted to introduce him. I think it was
I am asking him to explain to us, not you, Joe.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought, all right. Thank you. We have we have a Jones who I don't know whether he wants to pose the questions or he wants us to read it and answer it. Jones, do you want to speak? Jones, do you want to speak? You can unmute your system.
Well, good morning. Good afternoon. If you want me, I will speak, please. I prefer to speak.
Yes, please ask your question, because you've posed about 3 questions. Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much. I retired from the UN after 33 years. I worked in 6 countries, and I'm interested a lot in this group. Following the discussion, and very interesting. I want to thank Dr. Usman Bugaje, a very exciting and very wonderful presentation. I want to commend him, the excellent presentation. Thank you so much, sir. Number one, I'm a little bit concerned that you use the word stupid to describe those who agitate to break away from the country. At the same time, you acknowledge that there's inequity and inequality in the system. So I find it difficult to reconcile the two sides. A person who suffers inequity and inequality definitely will not be happy to remain in a place where he suffers that consistently and persistently. I give a story, and I'll leave the rest questions to be answered from the chat and left. About 41 years ago, I had a little boy who went to school somewhere in Lagos. To the federal government entrance or to federal government colleges. It's called 338, a particular state. He has a classmate, the same class, they were police officers' children. His classmate, the same age. That child is called 161/400. When the results came, this child who scored 168 got admitted into King's College in Lagos. The child who scored 338 did not get admitted to any federal government college, not even King's College. The boy came home crying. He cried for almost 2 days. We couldn't pacify him. The father is the commissioner of police, I speak. The child went to university, he left, and he left for the UK. He said, "We will not come out to Nigeria, never." Because at age 11, he saw inequity, inequality. It was disturbed. And he has not changed, and he is not ready to change. Because at age 11, he saw very glaring inequity and inequality in the system. Therefore, he is disturbed and is worried. So my question, therefore, is, what are the practical ways, sir, do you think we can address the underlying causes in our context of inequity and inequality? Because if we don't address this issue, we're going to have problems. I know Somalia. Somalia, 40 years of trouble is because of resource and power inequity and inequality. But heterogeneous, homogeneous, once this inequality is there, it's going to cause crisis. This is what we have in Nigeria. So how do we practically, actionable steps that we can take to begin to address the issue of inequality and also inequity in our system? Thank you so much. The rest of the questions, I think they are in the chat. I think they can be taken. Thank you very much for the opportunity to have.
All right.
Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Yes, Doctor, you can answer these questions, and we go back to the next set of questions, please, Ethan.
Thank you very much. Let me thank those who have raised questions, and it's good to see faces that I have not seen for some time. Very refreshing. Thank you very much. Let me start with the last one, if you don't mind. Ambassador, you have raised a very important point, and I'm very happy you have raised this point, that the major source of agitation and threats of secession is iniquity. Iniquity has been part of human civilization. It has always elicited similar resentments. But the point I was making is that how does breaking away solve the problem? Southern Sudan broke away because of the opposition of iniquity. I was in the Sudan, and I lived through some of the iniquities that they have suffered. And I see the point, but we have always said that breaking away in itself does not solve the problem. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is that we have got to come back to the table and solve our own problems. It can be solved. There are so many ways of doing so. We don't have to, but like I said, if somebody says she wants to break away and succeeds in breaking away, how does that really solve its own problem? Because he may find the same iniquity in the little polity he has created for himself. So we have got to learn as human societies to resolve the issues of inequity, and it can be resolved. And the way to resolve them is to first settle the leadership question, because this inequity is created by leadership, either omission or commission. So we need to first take or ensure that those who are going to come to leadership are not coming because they are some ethnic champions. We must avoid bringing people because they are Igbos or they are Hausas or they are Yorubas. No, we must insist those who are going to lead, irrespective, like Ambassador Onobu talked about Korea, which is one of the secrets of the growth in Korea, is not where they come from, is not what they share, no, it's their competence. And we have got to agree on those criteria. And we have got to stop talking about ethnic champions or people coming from a particular area, but hammer on the issue of competence. And we have got to participate in creating an equitable system. And this can be done, and I can come to that when I come to answer the question of Ambassador Okafor and Ambassador Anyao. So I hope for this point, I just want to clarify that they are stupid, because I think the way they are going is not going to solve their problem. It in fact may create more problems. And even if they succeed in breaking away, they can't take that part of the land and move it elsewhere. It's not possible. And therefore they have to live with the same people that may have, in their perception, created this inequity. And too often it is forgotten that if you blame a particular president for inequity, in our own case, if you go to his own state or his own local government, you will find the same people suffering the same suffering that your own people are suffering. So again, it's not that if he comes from state A, then state B, C, D are suffering and state A is not suffering. In fact, you may find that in his own very state, people are suffering far more than others. So again, I think we have not thought through this issue, and we need to rethink, we need to re-engage, And there are ways to look at this thing in a much better and more constructive manner than simply breaking away. This was my point. The next issue, Ambassador Onobu raised a very interesting question. I'm glad you did so. Sometimes I'm referred as an Islamic scholar. I see that as one of those things that we need to do. We have got to make sure that scholarship is comprehensive. Part of the problem of religious scholarship is that they do not read outside religious literature. They are very poor in sociology. They are very poor in philosophy. They are very poor in economics, if they have any economics at all. And the point that I want to make here is that for you to be an Islamic scholar, or to be a Christian scholar, or to be a scholar, once the word scholar is there, then you must be comprehensive, because knowledge is not compartmentalized. Knowledge by very nature is comprehensive. You have got to be able to. I have studied Islam in the same way many others have studied it. And I went into it precisely because I'm not happy with the way religious scholars tend to lock themselves into religious literature, not diversifying to understand the rest of the literature and knowledge that is out there. By the time they do so, they will become far better religious scholars, because they will be able to understand the world in which they live. They will be able to engage better. And this is why sometimes you may not know that I'm an Islamic scholar because I'm able to engage in different fields. And I'm not saying I'm the best, far from it. I'm learning. I do not even meet my own expectations myself. But I just want to make the point that I've studied Islam, and this is why I can engage Islamic scholars. And if you have been following some of the things, I do talk to religious scholars in the language they understand, and try to pull them out of their cocoon, out of their closed circle of religious literature, to understand economics, to understand politics, to understand culture and society and psychology, to even understand epistemology, the theory of knowledge. What is it that constitutes knowledge, and what does not constitute knowledge? And how do you differentiate between knowledge and opinion? All these are issues that we need to, because we need to give people comprehensive education. And I've succeeded in setting up mechanism within religious education that diversifies. And I'm happy to have students that I have taught that are now much broader in their perspective, much more accommodating in their views. And this is how it should be. I have not had the facility to set up, I'm still trying to do that a university where some of these things can actually be done. And we need to do it even as a nation, to make our own education comprehensive. We must never allow people to just read religious knowledge without other knowledge. That is dangerous. And so I hope this point is clear, and I'm happy that you raised it. But I also want to appreciate the points that I've learned from you also on Korea, and I have read a lot about Korea, and I've seen a lot of what they have done. Time will not allow us to go deep into that, but I think this is where some of you who have served in these places should be able to write your own experiences and to be able to make that available, to our circle of elite and our leaders, because there are lots of lessons that we can learn from there. Let me come to Ambassador Akinsoya. I had Ethiopia on my notes, and I had Ethiopia actually, if you remember when Meles Zenawi came, the new constitution actually was the first constitution, perhaps definitely in Africa, that allowed people to even succeed if they so wish. And that was like, breaking the barriers or the limits of democracy. And that created that freedom. And that, in fact, settled so many other questions in Ethiopia. So he actually breaks through and he changed the paradigm, so to speak. But one of the things that you find common in both Ethiopia and Korea that is a factor of their success is that pride that they have in their own country. Despite the diversity in Ethiopia, every Ethiopian, if you meet an Ethiopian outside Ethiopia, and even within Ethiopia, if you are not an Ethiopian, he will not tell you that he's Oromo or Amhara or Tigri. He will simply tell you that he's Ethiopian. And one of the things that Ethiopia has done consistently, when development partners go with, development assistance, they do not allow the development partners to determine what they want them to do. And it's part of pride. They'd say, okay, this is what we want to do. If you can help us in this, fine. If you are coming with some agenda or some area, then sorry, there is no space for you to do that. So it's all part of prioritization and self-pride, and we have got to cultivate. And we have a lot to be proud of in Nigeria. We have a lot to be proud of. But leadership has to shape this conversation, has to be able to inspire its own citizens to be proud of its own country. And Nigerians have done wonderful things abroad, not only in football, but in many other constructive things. And so we have got a lot to be proud of, but we have not gotten the leadership to really harvest those kind of achievements into a national pride, the people that can inspire more Nigerians to move in that direction. So I thank you for putting the Ethiopian dimension, which I could have if I thought I had more time. Now come to the more difficult questions. Ambassador Anyanwu talked about diversity. How can we create this elite consensus? Elite consensus can be created in a number of ways. If you have a good leadership, one of the first things they will try to do is to create, a national consensus. Because without a national consensus, the government itself cannot find direction, cannot find legitimacy. Because even if you are elected into office and you hold the reins of power, you cannot actually rule effectively if you don't have trust. And trust is a measure of legitimacy. And legitimacy is created by reaching out and making people to have a sense of belonging and ownership and sense of participation in their governance. When we have a regime that is incestuous, that is self-preferential, and that is insular, you do not get any conversation. And people pull away and they don't feel involved. Their views are not reflected. They don't feel cared about at all. So is there a responsibility of leadership to do so? But as we have today, if the leadership abdicates that responsibility, and this is why they lose trust. And as you know, nobody trusts government today. I mean, government may come out with a statement, they will do this policy, but people don't really believe them. And I mean, some factors, but today we can, even as elite, create our own consensus and confront whoever is in power as an elite with a consensus and make it possible for government to toe the issue, the line that the elite really want. Because the elite can, dominate the space, the civic space, and continue to speak, about issues until the government itself finds it, no longer possible but to consider these issues. They put them on the agenda, they put them on the radar. They set the agenda and the discussion. The government has to listen. This is something we can do. I have attempted, and I'm still working on that, to create a national consensus. I've set up a group across the country. We've started meeting, and we are very soon, going to come out. In fact, we would have had something on this October, but the COVID, we were targeting the 60th anniversary to do a series of conferences on the key issues around which we need consensus. But we have already gotten a group, and the group are quite happy to come together and to see, and every part of the country is reflected. All the diversities in the country are reflected. And when we came together and started discussing, everybody felt happy and wished that this had started earlier. And I want to invite any one of you to send me your emails. We'll send you all the papers, and you will see, and you should be part of this. So this is doable. And if government doesn't do it, which it should, because it's going to help it, we as elite, nothing stops us from stretching out, inviting others, forming a forum, having a conference, putting out all the ideas that we want, cultivating a lot of citizens, and eventually the ideas we generate, will be setting the agenda for any government in power. So I think this is the way to go. The other question is even more difficult, but is doable. What do we do about the leadership recruitment mechanism by Ambassador Okafor? I'm happy to report that we are also trying to do something on this. I can share some of the concepts that I have developed and I've shared with colleagues, and we have come round to trying to do 3 things. One, from my experience, because I also was generally the Secretary General of a national party, the AC, which became ACN, which went into merger with, in fact, it was the biggest block in the merger that produced the APC, as some of you know very well. As National Secretary, I learned quite a lot for the 4 years I was there. And one of the things that we think we will do, if you now go to any political party and say that your leadership recruitment mechanism is faulty, we need to fix it. We need to prioritize competence. We need. They will laugh at you because you don't have money. But if you were some kind of Dangote and you go to them, they will all listen because they are predicated on money. Or if you have power, you are a governor, they will automatically make you the leader of the party. While actually the chairman of the party is supposed to be the leader of the party because you pay from state resources. You distribute largesse of government. So this is the first thing. Now, the question here is, so what can we leverage to change this leadership mechanism? Like you know too well, in the real world, nobody gives you what you deserve. You only get what you negotiate for. And the currency for negotiation is power. The good news is power is not only political. It can be economic, it can be demographic, it can be moral. So the important thing is for us to acquire that power that we can now negotiate. And the easiest power to acquire is not money, is demographic capital. We can generate a demographic capital. And we can use this demographic capital to actually negotiate with these political parties. So this is the first thing. The second thing is, by the time you get this demographic power, and let me explain a little further. I hope the moderator, I'm not taking too much time because I think this is a very important issue that needs to be understood very well. the political, I mean, the demographic power we feel we can, in this day and age, if we come up with a forum, by whatever name we decide to, and we have a tentative name for it, and we put it out there in an electronic portal, so the people from the comfort of their homes using their phones or their other electronic devices can actually become members of this forum. We think we can raise 10 million Nigerians educated that can go online and be associated with this change. Meaning all those that really want to bring a change in the leadership recruitment mechanism. I know we are more than 10 million, because that's only 5% of the population. But we can put 10 million on an electronic portal. Real people with their telephones, with their locations and everything. And all they want is a change in the way leadership is recruited. They don't want to be president. They don't want to necessarily be this or that. No, but they want good leaders in their own country. With that 10 million, and these are people who can vote, you have a minimum of 10 million votes. If you go to any political party and say, here is 10 million, and I can give you even their voters, I mean, the number of their voters card, meaning they are ready to vote, no party can ignore that, even if it's a ruling party in any election. They will listen to you. Now, the next thing is to say, okay, the changes we want in your political party, or any political party for that matter, are basically three. One, that there should be content, because a lot of our parties don't have any content at the moment. They have no ideology. They have no direction. They are not defined by what they are. They are defined by the money bags that actually fund them. So you talk of Tinubu's party, you talk of Atiku's party, you talk of what's the other, Amechi's party, you talk of, Buhari's party, you talk of party in terms of names of people. And even these people, you can't even define what do they want. If you put them on a, on a webinar like this, give them 30 minutes, let them tell you exactly what kind of country do they want to produce. They can't articulate it. They can, say a lot of words, but you can hardly discern what exactly in their mind is the country they want to. So let me go back to the issue. We need a party that has content and ideology, whether it's going to be pro-poor, or it's going to be a pragmatic, or it's going to, prioritize human capital development. I mean, we have to have something that will define the party. Secondly, you have to put premium for leadership, right from the party itself through to those who are going to contest on the platform of that party. They must have a criteria. People who are going to be, aspire for any post must have educational qualification that is commensurate to the job that they are going to, just like you do in taking anybody in your companies. Each one of you, if you have a company, you advertise for a manager, and you look at their CVs, and you even conduct interviews just to ensure that the person coming to do the job has the qualification to do that job. So if you do that for a company, why don't you do that for a country? If the company collapses, it's only 1 or 2 people that suffers, right? But when a country collapses, look at the number of millions of people that are going to die, that are going to suffer. So we have to have premium. And like I said, there has to be education, there has to be character, and there has to be some measure of independence. The financial independence that you would not, because at the moment, in parties, you find, I have seen parties that have even got tailors as their legal advisors in the constitution. And we have seen parties that have got a man who is the woman leader. I mean, because there are no criteria, so all sorts of crazy things happen. And you also have to have financial independence. Every party must be independent financially, because if you are not independent financially, then you are vulnerable to money bags. Now, many people will tell you, no, you can't be independent financially, you have to depend. No, you don't. In this day and age, you can do crowdfunding. Let me just give you an example. If we're able to put 10 million in that portal, Imagine just 1 million of them, which is 10%, is able to contribute just 1,000 a month, not more. Automatically, every month, that gives you 1 billion. In a year, you have you have 12 billion to run a party. You don't need more than that. That's more than sufficient. And then it cuts off all these money bags. You don't need them. And anybody who has contributed and he doesn't like the way, you take out his 12,000 in a year and you give it out, let him move. And if you make it that only 1,000, you don't need more than that, and nobody can pay more than that, even if you have the money to. So whenever you come to sit, nobody takes any special seat. Everybody has the same voice. So these are the kind of things you can do. The third thing that you have to do after the party itself, you have to make sure that there is a plan, there is an agenda, there is something concrete, and this has to be smart. It has to be simple, everybody can understand. It has to be measurable. It has to be achievable. It has to have timelines that you want to achieve them. So these are some of the things that we think we can do if we have the demographic capital to negotiate with political parties. Maybe the last point on this, Ambassador Okafo, is you did also mention which people, because you think we are not related. We can actually go down to meet the real people. There are civic leaders, there are community-based organizations, there are lots of other form of social circles, and especially now with the Facebook, WhatsApp, Telegram, you can reach, a number of people, and there are ways to do that. But what is important is for us to take a decision that we want to change this nonsense that we are always agonizing over. Whenever we meet, we agonize over what we read in the newspaper, what we see on the television, the mess that we see. We look at our National Assembly, we shake our heads. Why should we continue to bear that agony? I want to believe some of us are far more educated than these people that are there. Are we saying that with all our education, we just sit and watch? Some people who are far less educated destroying our country? We can certainly outsmart them. Some people will say, no, you can't because these people have thugs. No, for goodness sake, we can do it. There are ways to go around that. So I just want to leave you on the note that some of the things I'm talking about are things that are already, if you like, coming to fruition, or at least they are being crystallized. These are ideas that we have. And any one of you who would want to be part of that would be glad, because you have what it takes to lead some of these things. Your age, experience, you have reached a stage where you are not looking forward to anybody to appoint you any post. You have seen it all. You are not looking forward to a contract. All your children have grown, they have gone to school. I mean, your needs are such that you can do these things. So I really think if you have one more service to render to your country before your time is completely up, I think this is it. I think you should join the efforts that are being and bring in your experiences to bear on these things. Provide the leadership that your knowledge, your experience, your age, has conferred on you. Don't give up on this country. There is no room for despair. And what we know is that if we don't get this thing done in the next election, I don't know the future, but we can see the projections. We may be in greater troubles than we already are. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Doctor. Two more questions or more before we are done. May I invite Ambassador Joe Ayalogo. Joe, please unmute your system. Joe, please unmute your system. Joe, if you can hear me, unmute your system.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, moderator, for giving me the floor. And let me join all of us in thanking Dr. Bugaje and congratulating him for giving us a good rundown on the problems of Nigeria and the problems with Nigeria. I would just a lot of issues have been raised, and but one that seemed to still worry me is that the issue of diversity and the management of diversity. I believe that that is the key problem with Nigeria and the key problem of Nigeria. We have accepted that diversity is in the DNA of human beings, especially since we tried to impress God to build him a tower, and then he said, no, I give you the Babel confusion. So just be with their diversities. And the world has been living it with ever since. I also think, we know our history. We know that even though that we blame the British for cobbling us together, but then we probably might not blame them too much because that is also their experience. Our problem is that unlike we failed to manage our diversities. And we started correctly because before we agreed to become independent in 1960, there were so many meetings and discussions by our elders, leaders at that time, and they were all very well about our diversity, and they came up with all sorts of ideas. And finally, we agreed to become a one nation, one independent nation. But we agreed on certain parameters, one of which is to the confederal or federal system, a regional system, almost like what the colonial masters had as their experience. And it served us for about 5 years, but certain things happened. And then we lost that game. We did not use the regional system anymore. We had the military. Unfortunately, even while the military was on, they went to Abuja and discussed how to still continue the negotiated arrangement of a regional system, but it wasn't accepted. It didn't go through. Now, ideally, after the war, the first thing that should have happened was that we would have gone back to the status quo antebellum, but we didn't. And of course, the army continued to be with us for almost another 30 years. Now, what I'm trying to say is that anytime we want to correct our mistakes of the past, we need still to go back to what we agreed to what we negotiated as the basis for our relationship as a nation. Without that, we'll still have a problem even to get the consensus, the national consensus, or to discuss how to manage our resources. We would have a problem. So what I want to ask now, is there really any difficulty? Is it impossible for us to go back, to look back at what we had negotiated as part of, as a condition pre-independence? Is it really difficult to do that? Because we've been at various times we say that, we give it all sorts of names and it becomes contentious. But the issue for me is go back to what was negotiated, because that's how it was discussed. The issues of our diversities were discussed and some agreements were made. I thank you again for a very impressive paper to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And I invite Ambassador Abdul Wahab, unmute your system, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator or Ambassador Moderator. Your Excellencies, Also want to join my colleagues to thank our dear guest lecturer, Dr. Usman Bugaje. It's great to listen to you today and great to see you again after very, very long time. Most of the issues have been taken by my colleagues, but there's one basic foundation that has not been addressed. And without it, we cannot have a great Nigeria of our dream. And that is our consensus on security, peace before development. Without peace, there can be no development. And anytime I raise this issue, it is usually dismissed with a wave of hand. And we are all intellectuals, ambassadors, and intelligentsias, professors. It's very unfortunate we don't know why we are here, where we are today. We must address the basic issue of peace and security. We have spent all our energies and resources on fighting and fighting and fighting. What energy do you have left to have development and all these beautiful things which we have all enumerated? What resources do we have left to move Nigeria forward? I give some instances. The first thing that we had was divide and rule. And we should not blame this continuously on the British government or the colonial masters. Then we had civil war, which I always say we shouldn't have had. We could have had differences, disagreement. With the civil war, we lost a lot of life, we lost resources and time. In very, very important time we lost. Let us forget about that. Then today, they gave us Boko Haram. I want to ask you, our dear brother, Dr. Bugaje, what is the meaning of Boko Haram? Who are the Boko Haram of today? Are they the original Boko Haram? That is the question. And what is the definition of jihadist? And what is the definition of humanitarian workers? Your Excellencies, my dear colleague, and our dear lecturer, you have humanitarian workers from Europe in every part of our country, in our villages and hamlets. They are there, only God knows what they are doing. And then we have the same from Europe, military advisors on our soil and military assistance. And then we say we are going to defeat Boko Haram. Is that possible? Let us think about it. How can we fight ragtag army for good 10 years? We must examine where this is coming from. The humanitarian, I'll give you an example. They say Islamic terrorists, and all of us, most everybody on this forum believe they are Islamic terrorists. They are Muslims. When they use that terminology here, they go to Congo, they know the issue of Islamic terrorists will not pay. They give them another name in Congo. Since independence, see what Congo is. They do a lot of things to cut away the resources. African leaders, can't we think? What is wrong with our leadership? Well, not only leader, all of us, the intellectual, the professor, the ambassador, what's wrong with us that we don't know the truth? If that happened in Congo and they come to Nigeria, they say Islamic terrorists, and they go to Mali. Mali today has 50 gold mines, and Mali does not have one single gold reserve. All the gold reserve, they are in Paris. They don't have any gold refinery. 50 gold mines. They give them military assistance. Their military advisors are on the ground. And again, they give them humanitarian workers who go to the villages. You know what that means, Your Excellencies. For example, in China, journey development, if China has allowed humanitarian workers to come to Europe, from Europe to them, do you think they will develop? Even the tiny star state of Singapore, if Singapore has allowed the humanitarian workers on their soil, they didn't do it themselves, do you think today Singapore will develop? So let us think about it. Without peace, there can be no development. What is our consensus on peace, security, and then development? Because Without peace, there can be no development. I thank you, Dr. Bugaje, for the brilliant lecture. You have given us a lot of food for thought, which we are going to think about. And then your project is a very ideal one about leadership. But before leadership, before development, before whatever thing we want to do for Nigeria, let us have peace so that we can travel in peace, we can sleep in peace. May Almighty God grant us peace in our heart, grant us peace in Nigeria, and I wish everybody a very, very peaceful anniversary. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Ambassador. Professor Bola Akinteriwa, unmute your system. Professor Bola Akinteriwa, please.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
I want to thank the organizers for promoting a knowledge-driven society in modern times. I listened patiently to the guest lecturer, but I don't know whether to agree with him or to disagree with him. I want to agree with him at one level because there are many fundamental points he raised that were factually correct. But at other levels, he raised some points from which insinuations are that, look, one cannot easily stay comfortable with his submissions. I thank Ambassador Jones for reminding us of one example of a relation of his who scored 338 and couldn't get admission, and 168 will get. It only reminded me of the case of Dr. Femi Badejo in Unilag, Queen's College. It's exactly the same story. Let me make my trust before disagreeing with Dr. Bugaje. The trust is simply that, look, Nigeria's problem is not in any way about management of diversity. I do not share the viewpoints of that. Like Dr. Bugaje, I'm not a diplomat, I'm not an ambassador. So like him, I don't speak in terms of language finesse. As a scholar like Dr. Bugaje, we have to say it as it is, so that if we are able to establish the truth, Nigeria will be able to make progress. You see, the issue is this. My argument is simply that political governance in Nigeria is consciously predicated on self-deceit. So when Dr. Bugaje is underscoring the issue of ideas, he gives the impression that people do not have ideas. While he's also telling us that Nigeria is a terra cognita for knowledge, that we have human resources, we have all this. And I agree with him at that level. Who will say that Osman Bugaje cannot provide leadership in Nigeria, that he cannot be a good president? So the knowledge, the idea he has. But now the main problem, for instance, my first level of disagreement with him is the characterization of people who decide, or the decision taken to either separate, to succeed, as stupid. He addressed that one earlier on. The issue is that you cannot separate an idea from the holder. The idea is a representation of the holder. If Dr. Bugaje is saying that an idea is stupid, he's directly saying that the holder is equally stupid. And I will say that no, those who want to go away, you can't describe them as stupid, because the issue is that the principle, the psychology of human differences will allow you to argue the way you want, while others can go their different way. If you are now saying that separation of people who decide to go away do not know what they are doing, the reality in international relations, there are many, many, many empirical cases where people have separated. You even mentioned the issue of Sudan. South Sudan, from 1950s to date, until about 5-6 years ago, when they became independent. When government does not listen to complaints, that is where people now say, all right, to thy tent, O Israel. My point is not a question of saying, look, people should secede. I belong to the power school of thought. I believe that if we have a Nigerian country that is completely free from political chicanery, completely free from iota, of rascality, then it will be okay. If you look at people who are talking about breaking away, it is simply because government is not listening. And then they have fears. Fear, for instance, they are talking about fear of a Fulanization. Government is not addressing the issue. Herdsmen, farmers, something. The government is not making pronouncement to that one. When we are talking about all these issues, you told us that there's nothing like true federalism. If there is true federalism, there cannot be false. What they are now saying is not the issue of false federalism, a faulty federalism. Federalism that does not operate on the basis of its standardized principles. That is the issue. Now, you said an idea. No, you said homogeneity is not an asset. I don't share your view at all. Let me give you the examples that clearly show that homogeneity, ethnic homogeneity, can be an asset. If it is not an asset, for instance, why does international law recognize the principle of self-determination? Self-determination is to allow people to break away, not only in the colonial context. The genesis of self-determination was to enable dependent territories, all right, to be autonomous, to be self-governing. There's also this concept of nation building. Sociologically speaking, and from an etymological perspective too, like we did refer to epistemology earlier on, theory of knowledge. The issue here is that when, for instance, a group of people, community, cannot find peace in a setting, then they can as well have the right to ensure that their safety, their survival is guaranteed. That is what is happening. If, for instance, why did, for instance, in 2005, Canada came up with this idea that there should be R2P, international responsibility to protect, R2P. It is simply because governments do not bother about, political rascalities, misgovernance, mistreatment of people. So in this case, they now say the international community can now come in such a way to prevent unnecessary secession, that they will come and stabilize. In a nutshell, the point I'm trying to make here is that Nigeria at 60, it's not that we don't have elite. You argue that elites are going in different directions. You are right. But why are they going in different directions? Why are they? That is the issue. It's not that the elite does not exist. It's not that the ideas do not exist, but the political way to do what is correct is what is the issue. And I conclude on the note, look, as I've said, I'm not an ambassador, I'm not a diplomat, but as a scholar from my experience in the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, no, please, when you want to tell the truth, when you want to do the correct thing, the same system, the same government will militate against you, will fight you, and the same elite that you are talking about do not exist, will do the contrary, will frustrate you. That is the bitter truth. So in this type of situation, if you ask me, why should I belong to a place whereby my life will be frustrated? Finally, look at it, look at injustice. We are talking about inequity, inequality, and so on and so forth. In 1994, the government of Nigeria, Lateef Jakande, was then the Minister of Works and Housing. Federal government collected money from people. In 2020, the house for which they collected money, they have not allocated anything, and they are not showing any responsibility. Now, I as an individual, how can you be preaching the sermon of Nigeria next to me, and you want me to listen to you? So please, we need to speak the truth. Nigeria political governance is predicated on self-deceit, and self-deceit will make people want to go their own way. Respectfully submitted.
Thank you, Professor. Ambassador Mamuno, please unmute your system. Ambassador, you found that? You found that? Yes, Ambassador Mamuno. You found that? Ambassador, please unmute your system.
Okay.
All
Excellency,
right,
yes,
go on.
Okay.
Good.
Good afternoon, Excellency, and afternoon, Ambassador Olisumeka, our doyen and the speaker. I wasn't actually raising my hand to speak. I sent in a chat, but I can say what I sent in a chat. I listened to the lecture, which was very brilliant, and also the brilliant contributions from our respective colleagues and the participants in this forum. And I just wanted to add that I think in our quest for a better Nigeria, there's one very important thing that is missing, and that is self-searching. Because I feel that we're always pushing the blame, it's always somebody else. I think it is high time we also look in our hearts individually. Most of us, almost all of us are retired already. We have held some good offices, high positions in government, and then we have to just look back and it's like, what I was trusted with, how well did I handle it? Where did I go wrong and how can I correct it? And how will I be able to influence, even beginning from my own home, the village, the community, just within our own spheres of influences, how can we, touch the lives of others to see that if we really want a better Nigeria, we first have to look at what we can do without any selfishness from our own part. And then when we put in our best, then we can look at what the other person is doing. That was all I wanted to say. That first is a deep, because it begins with each one of us. And I think that we should all look inwardly. How can we, okay, we've missed our opportunity now as career diplomats because we've already retired, but maybe they will not even listen to us anymore. But where we are right now, how can we do it better? First with self-searching and then whatever will come next. That was all I wanted to say, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Can I invite Ken Wachuku? You also have some questions or comments. Ken Wachuku.
Thank you, Excellency. My question is this: how feasible will it be to adopt the US system whereby the amount of money that any individual can contribute to a political party or a candidate is pegged by law? By these practices, you can see that the influence of money bags, as the lecturer put it, will be limited. Of course, I'm saying this is without prejudice to the fact that if anybody wants to support a political cause in the US, you can channel your money to super PACs, which will promote that cause, but without any visible collaboration with that political party. To recapitulate, therefore, is it possible for us to adopt the same system in Nigeria, whereby if you are contributing, your amount of money you're contributing is pegged, so we don't become enslaved to these money bags? Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
That's our last question for today, and Dr. Usman will again respond to all the questions.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed a lot of the interventions, especially by Professor Bola. I can tell you I very much enjoyed it, and I, I like it. But let me start with Ambassador Joe Ayologo. I think if I understand what Ambassador is basically saying, that there is an agreement which he thinks we should go back to. Yes, we shouldn't continue to blame the British 60 years after. And we should also realize the British were not here for philanthropy. They were here basically to do their business, which is to exploit the human and material resources of Africa. They have done so. I don't think what the British, they may have been inadvertent and they may have stampeded us into coming together. But if you look at the trend of integration in Africa and in history, you would see that sometimes in the future, through trade and through so many other ways, we're going to meet each other, we're going to integrate into each other in a way that has naturally taken place across Africa. So for me, the issue of any pre-independence arrangement that needs to be renegotiated is very possible. I don't see anybody stopping us from putting on the table what we really want. This is what is going to bring development, because it's going to bring trust, it's going to bring peace, and it's going to give us the kind of atmosphere to trust each other. So for me, I'm open. Any question anybody wants to put, we should be prepared to. We should be able to explain, we should be able to argue, we should be able to eventually come to a particular position, which is mutually beneficial. So I don't see anything that would stop us from putting whatever precondition or whatever agreement of pre-independence that we need. Even if it was done in 1914 and we wanted to go differently, we have the freedom to renegotiate our federation and to go back to whatever we think will work. Of course, we have to be mindful of the fact that, you know, whatever agreement that was done in 19 whatever, we are now in the 21st century. And 21st century has its own challenges, has its own context. And we should not be seen to be too much into history without taking consideration for the reality. Outside that, I think it is healthier to go back to whatever agreement and to discuss it on the table. So I don't think we should stop anybody from raising any issue. And I think we are mature enough to discuss these issues and to be able to come to some amicable consensus. Ambassador Abdul Wahab has raised many issues. And I can see that as he was raising them, he was also answering the question itself, leaving for me very little to say beyond the fact that you know, his own suggestions have actually been, shall we say, vindicated by a lot of documentaries that have been now done. One of them is by Al Jazeera around Mali, because clearly the big nations of the West have got interest in the resources that are in Mali, that are in a number of our countries, in Congo, and they are a factor. But I don't want us to stop there and to assume or to think or believe that it is entirely the making of these nations. They are an accomplice in what we are going through, but I don't want them, or I don't want us to believe that it is all created by them. We have our own portion of the blame, which we need to address. And if we had done what we needed to do, perhaps they would not have found the opportunity to do what they are doing. So I agree with him that security is important. Without it, you cannot have development. And this is partly what is slowing down our development, because of the insecurity in many parts of the country. Investors won't come, and even others who are indigenous, you know, cannot operate and do businesses in a lot of these places, so we cannot create jobs. But I want us also to see that the Nigerian political economy has excluded a large number of young people who have become desperate and who therefore can easily be recruits in anybody who wants to destabilize the country. And it's part of our responsibility, or those who are in government, to make sure that they take the necessary steps. And in this matter of insecurity, we have done each one of us, I think, has done what he can. Some may have sent memos silently. Some of us who can go to the television or radio stations to speak to government, we have done so. We have told them that they are an accomplice in the continuity of these security breaches, not only Boko Haram, not only the banditry in the Northwest, but all the insecurity in the middle belt in other parts of the country. And we have said it severally that this particular government has been, has shown its utter incompetence in dealing with these issues. And that's, at this stage, this is the best we can do, because we don't have the power to remove the service chiefs. We don't have the power to do other things, but we have the power to speak, and that we should speak more about these things until government becomes compelled to listen to us. And this we shall continue. There are other ways of engaging the government to show them, that what they are doing is wrong and this is what they need to do. We shall continue to do that until, of course, 2023. We should make sure that whoever is going to come 2023, we don't fold our hands and wait until he comes and messes up the country and then we start shouting. Rather, we should be part of the process. Make sure that the persons, whoever is going to come, should be somebody who has the competence, who has the understanding, who has the ability, or who can be reached, who can be spoken to, who can be engaged, who can be discussed with. So these are some of the lessons that we have to. We hope there will be some improvement before we get there. But if we don't, our chance that I can see is, if any, from between now and 10, any other opportunity comes, I think we should seize it. So Abdul Wahab, thank you. And I have not seen you for quite a while. It's good to also see you. Your voice is still what it is. So you don't appear to be aging like some of us. So we'll find out what it is that keeps you this young. Bola, thank you very much for raising this point. And I really enjoyed the point you have raised. And I think this is the kind of rigor I anticipate in any discussion of this nature. I think all the perspectives and the kind of we should query ourselves. We should interrogate the statements and the ideas that we put on the table, so that we can come up, with stronger. Even if I retain my view, I would now be able to argue for what I believe more strongly, and perhaps in ways that will communicate better. Well, what I take from you are two things, basically. One is that people who may want to separate are not necessarily stupid because of what they are facing. It's like a stone wall. They can't do anything else. And of course, they need to preserve their dignity, and so they want to separate. Now, where I said the idea is stupid, I meant to say that it does not solve the problems. It may appear to do so for a start, but ultimately it doesn't. You can argue, and I do say in every statement there are exceptions. Singapore was actually expelled, from Malaysia, and it did far better than Malaysia after separating. But you see, the circumstances in Singapore and the internal workings of Lee Kuan Yew and his people is what actually brought the success. So I do agree with you. It's not in every case that we have this particular situation, but I'm looking more in the context of Africa. I'm looking more in the context of the discussions that are taking place. I feel a lot of the ideas that we hold have not been thought through, and they have not been, if you like, rigorously debated. There has not been a proper dialogue. There has not been. Most of the dialogues that we call dialogues are the national conferences that governments fix. And these conferences are designed to achieve a particular objective. I would want us as people, as Nigerians, to create our own dialogue. What stops me from inviting Bola to a conference where we put all these ideas on the table. And I intend to do so. And I expect him also to invite me with my ideas, and we sit down as colleagues, as people who have got this, common interest in making this country work. And it is because we have not ventured out to do this ourselves. This is why we have allowed government to manipulate us, one government after the other. Therefore, we should, rise above government, talk to ourselves as citizens, talk to ourselves as elite, and find out exactly what are the issues. Now, when I hear about Fulanization or even Islamization, honestly, I laugh, because you are giving the Fulanis more credit than they deserve. They are giving the Muslim more credit than they deserve. Because I know for sure there has not been any one circle in which they have set out to, Fulanize or Islamize. These are all fears generated genuinely. I mean, I see the sources of fear, but there is also the other side of the story. And the only way to resolve some of these issues is when we sit not as government representatives, but as citizens, and to debate these issues. And we have started this at the National Consensus Group that we have created. And we said, don't hold anything, bring everything on the table. Because we understand the intention of doing so is not to deride a particular people. It is not to cause any particular harm. No, you have got an issue that you want to put on the table. Let everybody look at it. So I take it that, like I said, one, I want you to understand what I mean, that when an idea doesn't really solve, then it has not been thought through. And I don't want us to keep doing the same thing over and over again without getting anywhere. But I also think that at the end of the day, it is this dialogue between ourselves that we think would really resolve some of these issues. And I'm confident that when we sit down as educated people, we're not going to fight. We may agree, we may disagree, we may come back to agree, but that itself is healthy, because when you speak out these things, you discuss them, you deepen your understanding of the other, and you see arguments that you have not thought before, and you go back again and you reconsider. But at the end of the day, I take it that we can always agree on something, even if it is pro-tem, even if it is temporary. That for now, let us do 1, 2, 3 things. And then we resume after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and let us see how we are going to. And gradually we'll resolve these problems. I read the book of Paul Collier, and when you read about the history of Europe itself, how it came to where it is at the moment, I mean, ours is actually even much better. I mean, Germany in the 14th century had nearly 200 or 300 different dialects of German languages, and each dialect is fighting with with the other. And you know the wars that France and Germany fought. Yet Macron, one of the first things he did after his election, I mean, within the first week, was to go over to Germany. Those of you who have served in Berlin, you have seen these statues and structures of the war. Yet one of the first things Macron did was to go to Merkel to see how can they salvage the European economy. And this is exactly the kind of thing. I mean, Europe has been struggling to follow the European Union, and you can see the problem, but they have been able to understand, and they are deepening their understanding of the difference between unity and uniformity. And this debate is going on. And you can see even when British, I mean, the Brexit issue is being discussed, you can see the way it's being handled. People are reading, people are trying to make sense of it. How do we stop this? How do we do this? How do we, and this is the way it should be. And human ingenuity, I'm confident, can resolve any issue. And if we sit down with that intention, not to agree necessarily, but when we bring out our own arguments, we understand each other better, and we'll go back happier. So, Bola, thank you very much for what we have done, and I expect more of this subsequently. Ambassador Mamona, I think, is basically saying that we should all start with ourselves. I had a teacher in my postgraduate, who once quoted one of his very famous quotations. He said, then I was a young man in my 20s, and he thought I was revolutionary. So he said, a young man in his 20s thinks that he can change the whole world. When he comes to his 30s, he realized the whole world is too big. So he reduces, that change to his own country. In his 40s, he realizes even that country is too much. So he goes back to his region, right? In his 50s, he concentrates on his family. In his 60s, he wants to be left alone to concentrate on himself. But I said I was going to prove him wrong. So I'm still with a lot of my ideas. Yes, I have modified them as I learn along the line. So, but I think what Ambassador Momono said is also a very important point. Let's see how we can start in our own communities. If I have my way, I'll make all retired ambassadors local government chairman of their own local governments, because then they'll pour all these ideas that they have learned at the local level, and you will see the local government, changing completely. I mean, see the kind of people you are having now as local government chairs. They know basically nothing. Most of them are cronies of some of the big, boys or big girls, and this is where we are. So Ken Wachuku raised the issue of the feasibility. I think it's feasible. I think it is possible to, like I said, to discuss whatever is feasible and possible within ourselves. I really have no problem. And I repeat, and this is the note I want to also end up with, I think all our problems are linked to knowledge or absence of it. I remember a Greek sage saying there are only two things in this world. I mean, basically, knowledge and ignorance. And every problem that you have is associated with ignorance. I mean, he said there is only one good and there is only one evil. That good is knowledge and that evil is ignorance. And I think the more educated we become, the more we are prepared to read and to have a discussions of nature, the more we'll be able to solve a lot of these problems. And I hope we can have a much better educational system than we're having now. Part of the issues of Boko Haram is because these people have not been educated. And the elite have taken over the money that would have been meant for their schools, and we're paying for it. So, and again, religious education, coming back to, coming back to Ambassador Onubu, I mean, the religious education is an education that we should not allow to continue the way it is. We should regulate it. It's because it's not being regulated. So all sorts of things are being taught in the mosque and the churches that are inimical to a healthy human society. And we should be able to know what is being taught. One of the things I've been campaigning, even at the state level, is that there must be commissions that will regulate religious education. At the moment, I suppose it applies to both, but I would know my own situation better. At the moment, people just open schools anyhow, religious schools, and somebody with a smattering of Arabic, you don't know where he has trained, you don't know his qualification, you just hand over children to him. And you go to the market to earn a living. And then he teaches them, God knows what he teaches them. And nobody regulates. And no country allows this thing to happen. You can't do that in Sudan. You can't do that in Mali. You can't do that in some of this. You have been to these countries. But here in Nigeria, you have got proliferation of schools. You can't even count them. You don't know what these children are being taught. I mean, are we surprised that we are where we are? So these are the kind of things we should do. And religious education must be broadened to include numeracy, literacy, sociology, psychology. All the things that really give you a comprehensive education must be there. Otherwise, you are training a bigot, and it's going to create a problem for you. Just like we see these crazy people, when you hear them speak, you know that they are clinically psychotic. So we have got to really come back to two things. One, how do we promote knowledge? By giving good education, by making knowledge to become, and how can we as elite ensure that leadership is always the best of what we have? Thank you very much.
For taking all the answers as brilliantly as you've done with your lecture. Now, we are not going to end this without doing a proper introduction. And you pardon us for this. So I'm going to go back to Kano, where Ambassador Omar is waiting to complete what he started earlier this morning. Ambassador Omar, please unmute your system and speak to us again. You have unmuted him.
Oh.
Unmute your system. Okay, good. Yes, go on.
Okay, sir. Your Excellency, the President of ACAN, Your Excellency, our respected Doyen and mentor, Your Excellency, the Executive of ACAN and the moderator, other participants in this lecture, my dear colleagues, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. First of all, it is my great privilege and honor to be given the task of giving this introduction, which unfortunately could not be given, which should have normally preceded the lecture. Personally, I have known Dr. Bugaje since the late 70s when I was in ABU, and we always ran to his lectures because of his eloquence, his position, his moderation, and he always gave us an alternative to what we normally hear in the campus, which is offered to the left. That being what it is, I would like to say that Dr. Bugaje is a public intellectual with vast experience in advocacy and policy formulation. He studied pharmacy at ABU and later obtained his MA and PhD from the Institute of African and Asian Studies, University of Khartoum, Sudan, where he also served as a lecturer. He then became active in the civil society, becoming a director of the Islamic Center Zaria. He served as a secretary of the Islam in Africa Conference, the first global conference on Islam in the continent. He also established Network for Justice, an organization committed to the advancement of human rights. He was a member of the Constitution Review Committee, which was then constituted by the federal government. He was also instrumental in the formation of Transition Monitoring Group, TMG, the first indigenous group that has consistently monitored elections since the year 1999. In 2001, he established the National Development Project, an NGO which focused on policy design and the only such organization in Nigeria. Bugaje was a frontline democracy activist during the military regimes of the 90s. This earned him some occasional arrests. He was one of the founders of the G13, which later became the G34, with members from all over the country. This group agitated for democracy, and the military authority took very serious measures against it. The G34 later metamorphosed to PDP, the party that successfully won the presidential election of 1999. He was appointed special advisor political to the former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. In 2003, he was elected member of the Federal House of Representatives, and he served as chair, House Foreign Relations Committee. In 2010, he became the National Secretary of the Action Congress of Nigeria, the largest opposition party then. Since 2011, Dr. Bugaje became more active in civil advocacy for development and good governance. He assembled professionals from various fields across northern Nigeria and established a platform, the Arewa Research and Development Project, ARDP. The group published the strategic agenda for the Northern Development Stand in 2014, and it has remained the most comprehensive development strategy for Northern Nigeria. He has consistently remained active in his advocacy and is currently working on the Al-Majri issue. Bugaje has over 50 academic and non-academic papers. He has been a keynote speaker and guest lecturer at various forums on governance and social development. Some 4 years ago, he declined ambassadorial appointment in order to maintain his independence and didn't want any distraction from his active participation in development advocacy. Recently, he has conducted many media engagements on the challenges facing our country. He is a voice of reason and moderation, a great social and political mobilizer, and indeed an embodiment of humility and scholarship. In addition to his native Hausa and of course English, Dr. Bugaje is fluent in Arabic language. He is a man of ideas, erudite, and articulate. This is my brief introduction of the guest speaker. Thank you very much.
I thank you, Ambassador Omar. We are grateful that you eventually could join us from Kano. And now we invite our first vice president to do the needful as he has done consistently in all these lecture series. And as a get set, I also want to recognize the presence of our Doyen, Ambassador Ignatius Olisemeka, and also to announce to the House that since morning we've had with us Ambassador Ogunsulure. I sincerely hope that our first Vice President recognizes distinguished senior colleagues who have helped build the foreign ministry. Ambassador Akinsoya, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Your Excellencies, the President of ACAN, our revered Doyen, Ambassador Lisemeka, the elders, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It has been a very, very brilliant lecture. The lecture that Dr. Usman Bugaje gave us, as well as the lively debates, interactive sessions, the various ideas and the proposals and the lively discussion we had reflects the significance of this series of lectures that the ACAN, as part of the 60th anniversary independence celebrations, are put forward. What we've been able to hear from Professor Dr. Bugaje, the fourth in the series of the 4 lectures that we have had, it's Dr. Mogalu kicking off the lecture series, Bishop Matthew Hassan Kuka as the second speaker, the lady in the diaspora, Dr. Iwowo, and today we have the benefits of listening to a scholar, an unrepentant defender of democracy, Dr. Usman Bugaje. I'm particularly delighted because what I saw of you, the scholarly presentation and the mentorship that you did, because I'm aware that you mentored an Ethiopian to become the Vice Chancellor of the Addis Ababa University. And all the things you have said today are pointers to the person that you are, and that your perception of our country, taking advantage of your experiences, your scholarly disposition, reveals that Nigeria is not short of people of ideas. Nigeria is not a banana republic. Nigeria is not an incapable state, because in the balance in the United Nations, now you have the incapable states. We have the people, we have the resources. What is important is how to harness these resources and for the good of our country. The lecture that you gave us and the series that we have had is preparing us for the crescendo. The climax of the series of lectures will be on the 6th, when we will have a lecturer or a professor of international relations in the University of Ife, Obafemi Awolowo University, to give us a lecture on Nigeria's role in international affairs, the last 60 years, and the prognosis for the future. So all these are series of lectures that gives us the basis of understanding of what motivates or what leads to the postures of Nigeria in the international arena. That is our terrain. We believe that these are very good things that prepares us, so shows a lot of understanding of what Nigeria is capable of doing, what are the changes that we should effect. And I want to now seize the opportunity to thank once again our guest speaker for today. We have benefited from your wealth of experience, your scholarly disposition, and we thank you for all that you've been able to give us. Our elders, our doyen, the people, our elders that are shaping our movements, that are part of us, part of our movements. And I have met particularly Ambassador Ignatius Olisebeka, a former minister who has always been with us, who has always directed us, who has always shown us the way, this is the way to go. He himself, at the beginning, gave a very brilliant exposé that has now turned serious. This morning, as early as about 6 o'clock, I was reading in the deeper context his speech that really provide the basis for all that we continue to do. Your Excellency, we continue to thank you for your guidance, for all that you are doing for ACAN, and also we use you as a point of contact. I saw Ambassador Olisebeka turning in, but I was told, Ambassador Gusuri, but I was told that he came in, he was trying to test his device, and he has left us. Tito for Ambassador Fafora, who came in, and I saw him, and these are our past, these are people that are helping us, that are shaping, that are guiding us. I can continue to play that role that you mentioned, Professor Bugaje. We are not an appendix of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We are not a labor movement, but the role that we have played over the years as a representative of our countries, we believe that we have something to give, and we continue to give it. Yes, we have met the president, we have met the vice president, we've met the foreign minister on several occasions, and we continue to put our best. But at the same time, we need the welfare. We need to take care of ourselves. Let me, on a final note, thank all the participants, all the colleagues that put this together. Our presidents, Ambassador Shinkai, given the directives from the rear, Ambassador Keshi and the committee that continued to put this together, and also all our colleagues in Abuja and in Lagos that have continued to be a source of support in ensuring that this series of lectures are successful. Let me also thank our friends from the diaspora, our colleagues in the diaspora, who have been able to hook into this series of lectures. Finally, I thank you all, and I hope that you would also join us on the 6th of October when we shall be looking at the terrain that we are and you'll be able to make contributions to make it into a success. I want to thank you all, and thank you for listening.
I thank you, Ambassador Akinsoya, our first Vice President, National Vice President. I'm also grateful to the guest lecturer. I remember when I first called him, there was no hesitation at all in his answer that he will be with us today. And for that, I'm most grateful for your acceptance to be our guest speaker for this afternoon, this morning, moving into the afternoon. I also thank my colleagues, Ambassador Zo, Ambassador Chris, Ambassador Folonshaw Otukoya, and Ambassador Bode Adeke. I thank you all, ladies and gentlemen. And with that, we come to the end of this series. We look forward to we are issuing out some news item on the Akan Award, which will take place 1st October 2020. So ladies and gentlemen, it's raining here in Abuja very seriously and very cold where I am in our control room. So I wish you all a happy week. And to Dr. Usman Bugaje again, I thank you most sincerely. You've been wonderful, and God bless you. God bless each and every one of you. Bye for now. All right. Well, that's done.